Thank you very much. I'm really impressed. There are a lot of people here. You would come out on such a miserable night to listen about the landscape. That's really quite unusual. And thank you very much. First of all, I need to know this because I've been told that there could be a glitch between the simultaneous translation and the images that you're going to see. So just before the disaster begins, because I always attract horrible IT things, are most people able to understand English here or not? I mean, could I see if there are a lot of people who can understand English? Because I won't give up the ship if there are many people who can't. You can't see out there. Whoa, are these the people who can or who can't? Oh my God, okay. That didn't get me anywhere. Okay, so, first of all, I just wanted to say that I am really nervous, but the reason I'm nervous is that I'm very, very interested in coming here because my husband, Marcus, he's in the audience somewhere. I think I see him. Well, I see him. And he's working with David Chipperfield, and he's working on a project in Antwerp, or close to here, not in Antwerp. And he's been telling me about Beaux-Arts and about the cultural scene that's actually happening in Belgium, and that there's so much art, there's so much fashion, there's so much interest in culture that he actually encouraged me to do this because basically I hate giving lectures. So, but I did want to come here, and we had a great day today. We just went shopping. That was bad, but it's true that there seems to be a lot of things going on in the street. Okay, I don't have a lot of time. I have way, way too many images. What I'll do is I'll give my little spiel up front, and then we can just get into seeing images of the work. And I'll probably go through images really, really quickly because I think it's better to show you pictures of what we do than spending a lot of time talking about it. But before I launch into the images, I wanted to say that, first of all, we have an office. We have two offices, one in London, one is in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And I'm not sure how many people we have because we've been involved in the economic meltdown, but we probably have around 40 people altogether. And we've been involved in all types of projects, from retail shopping centers, we're doing a casino in Las Vegas, major mixed-use developments, redevelopments, regeneration, some hotels, an occasional art commission, housing, and more typically major public open space projects in the US, in the UK, in Europe, and Japan. And tonight I thought I would talk about the role of landscape architects and how beauty and cultural relevance create sustainability, which is something that everybody's focused on, and how an enhanced landscape can actually create a positive economic value for the surrounding areas of the landscape or the public open space. Aesthetics may not be a life or death issue, but nonetheless the quality of one's life is about all one has. And if given a choice, any human being would choose to live in an environment with a high visual or aesthetic quality. And because visual quality is so subjective, we seem to be unwilling or unable to articulate the importance of the visual component of environmentalism. And actually, it's very difficult to have people understand that the landscape is a cultural artifact, and therefore it has cultural content. Most people think about landscapes as nature, natural landscapes. It's difficult to quantify aesthetics in any economic equation. And visual quality, unlike water or air quality, can't be easily quantified or reduced to a bottom line value. However, we all know how important it is, and especially when we're buying shoes, or like I did today, or cars, or even deciding what city you want to live in. We have to fully appreciate that the visual quality of the environment must be considered in and included under the umbrella of environmentalism and sustainability. And that the visual quality of our environments, meaning our built environments, whether they be interior or exterior, affects us because we're human beings. And a degraded visual environment negatively affects us as surely as air or water pollution affects us. Having worked primarily in the US for many, many years, I've come to believe that in the US, our urban environments and public spaces have been in a terrible spiral of devaluation and neglect. And along with the general lack of ecological considerations, we build our environments without consideration of aesthetics, unless we are dealing with high-profile spaces such as urban plazas, parks, and waterfronts. But I find that that's also true here in Europe. However, the majority of our built environments rest outside these particular types of landscapes. Our urban landscapes actually mostly consist of parking lots, strip malls, streets, sidewalks, on and off ramps to highways, service corridors, railroad yards, traffic intersections, and yet more parking lots. And ironically, most of us live and work in and around these neglected and visually degraded environments. Yet we continue to allow our built environments to be built cheaply and without aesthetic expectations. And these environments have also fallen outside our notion of what environmentalism is. Or, as one immediately associates environmentalism either in terms of ecosystems or as it pertains to our picturesque wilderness areas. Human beings and our psycho-emotional needs are strangely absent from environmentalism. However, environmentalism is incomplete and counterproductive if we do not consider ourselves as part of the equation. And ironically, it is how a culture deals with these unloved types of spaces that come to characterize us culturally, perhaps even more profoundly than our signature parks and plazas, as they actually take up much more space. But there are rules now that deal with many of the environmental issues so correctly forced upon the construction industry. However, it's the visual quality, the design, which affects us psychologically and emotionally. It's the design that will create a sense of place and identity for us individually as well as collectively. It is also the connection with the culture, the meaning and beauty brought to a site, which will make a place cherished and integrated into the culture. It's the art that will transform a site into a place and will create memory and identity. If these things are achieved, it will be only then that a site will truly achieve sustainability. If a site is designed so that people care about it, it will be sustained. If it does not connect in a cultural way, no matter how well it may function ecologically, it will not be valued and therefore maintained. And all the resources used in the creation of this work will eventually be wasted. So, ignoring design quality is not a sustainable strategy. There are some spaces, however, that stand to represent us more vividly and more widely than others. And these are the types of spaces we are generally asked to do. Public spaces of high visibility that have the potential to not only function as places to sit and recreate, hang out, and enjoy, but actually to create a symbol or an image for a particular community. And along with all the other pragmatic requirements, it's usually the unarticulated requirement that the space performs the face of a neighborhood or the face of the city itself. And we're asked to create a there, and create often a destination. Communities want to be put on the map, and I found that the more global that we've actually become, the more desperate it seems like people are to become individuated. In other words, to see themselves as somehow special, and to find out what that is. Creating places which are memorable, describable, and have a strong image serves an even higher function, and that of community-scale desire to be represented as a group or a city, or even a country to the outside world. Even further and greater importance is that the landscape and its quality or lack of quality actually forms the bedrock of our own individual self-image and self-esteem. An artfully designed environment can achieve the goal to affect, hopefully, for the positive, how people can come to feel about themselves. A designed landscape can move people emotionally, and make people think, question, and feel, and basically causes interaction between people and their environment. And it's become more and more true that these open spaces function to bring different cultural groups together and different groups of socioeconomic status. And they more and more function as the actual melting pot when world demographics are switching around and immigrants are moving all over the place. We need these open public spaces in which to allow this to actually happen. It is through the recognition of oneself in an environment that creates impression and memory. The creating of a landscape that is artful, provocative, and moving can have the possibility of functioning at the very highest level, which is to create a sort of communal self-esteem and to serve the human psyche. So, for the end of my little talk here, I do have a manifesto, a landscape manifesto. And my ambitions for our built environment are very great. And I'm advocating for us collectively to, number one, become more aware of the fact that we are building our environment. It is an artifact. We must bring into balance an ecological component, a social component, and an artistic component if we are to live in it. Two, to understand that landscape and environment mean more than a picturesque setting. The environment is where we live and what we experience in our day-to-day lives, and it's made up of many kinds of spaces and functions, all of which need to be thoroughly designed and intended. Actually, the landscape is the very platform upon which we do everything. It's what connects us to each other. It holds all the infrastructure, and it holds us all together. So it's becoming, as our cities are building, getting bigger and bigger, not necessarily here in Europe, but the rest of the world, the public landscape and how it functions is absolutely critical to how a city itself functions. Three, to be aware that we must build and reclaim our environment aesthetically, for to make our world ugly negatively affects us as humans and is therefore not a practical or sustainable strategy. Four, place a higher value on our public spaces, especially public spaces such as highways, streets, dumpster areas, mall parking lots, as they constitute the majority of our landscape environment. Five, understand that in addition to the need to protect nature, meaning our natural systems, that our own human nature must be tended if we are to live in the world we are building for ourselves. Aesthetics are not an afterthought. They must be a priority when building our environment. Six, expand our language of what is possible in our built environment. Our landscape must be embraced as one of the cultural art forms, as architecture, art, dance, music, if we are to find a more meaningful integration with nature in our built environment. We need to expand our language and raise the bar for aesthetic expectations in the landscape so that we may more constructively face the new relationship we are in the process of forging with nature. And finally, landscape architects actually do this job of designing the landscape, of the platform, by giving it form, meaning, and beauty, the creation of context, memory, and place. We are in charge of shaping the very human artifact of our built landscape. The visual quality, now determined by us, and therefore should be designed by us, meaning not just landscape architects, but all designers, help to shape and to define the quality of the lives we lead. And the quality of our existence will depend on the design decisions we make about our environment. Okay, I'm done with that. So let's get on with some pictures. Now I'm going to go very quickly. Oh, good. If anyone out there happens to have a laser pointer in their pocket, just thought I would ask. I couldn't find mine. Okay. This is a picture of our office. To your right is the London office, which actually now is twice as big as the US office. This is an old picture, but we work as one office, and that's not the easiest thing to do, but that's exactly how we do it, and we work all over the world. Right now, we're probably doing the least amount of work in the United States. Actually, that turned out to be a blessing in disguise. But what I've done tonight is actually try to show you the most recent work that has gotten built and work that is in progress. Now, I'm diverting for that for a second because a long time ago, we did do a competition with Willem Neutelings. I think this was in 2002. It's for Antwerp. the abandoned Belgian railway yards. I don't really remember all the names of the neighborhoods. I couldn't really actually pronounce them when I was working on it. So I can't really remember the specifics about it, but I do remember that we didn't win it, and it broke my heart, and I thought that the jury screwed up. They should have picked us, but I'm biased. But we did try to do a number of things. It was an extremely interesting piece of land, and these are kind of typical things that come across our desk, as landscape architects, which are these kind of random, strange pieces of land that are going to be reborn into another use. And it has a very, very strange shape. It's surrounded by a great variety of different neighborhoods. This glitch is really not good. Wow. Okay, are you sure you can't understand English? Yes, okay. Try not to look at it. And the chore of the landscape, of the design, was to try to bring meaning, or a new meaning, into this big, big site, so that it could be actually reused by the city. It's about 24 hectares. And it was interesting because there were so many disparate pieces to it. One of the pieces kind of went right up to the harbor that was busy being developed. In the west part, which is up there, it was butted into a well-to-do, well-heeled neighborhood. There was going to be offices. I actually don't know what has happened. I'd like to go out there someday to see what's going on. But this is the west area was the place that actually had funding, had activity, had a lot of things happening economically. And the lower area, the one that out east, had a number of the demographics were changing, a lot of immigrants coming in, and the space really had to function as a big melting pot. I'm trying to figure out how to divide the spaces up. We basically came to the conclusion that the west area, the top area, would be a much more cultivated, park-like space that could actually be integrated with the mixed use, the office, the residential area that was up against the, being developed against the dock area, the port. And then the middle area, the belly of it, was a great big public civic open space that the whole city was invited to. And then the east area was really a great big playground where we envisioned having all sorts of sports. Okay. So, I don't know whether Will is in the audience. He probably should explain this more better than I, but we had some very simple diagrams. One of the ideas in these parks is how do you survey it, how do you get through it, how do you make sure people are safe, because safety in the public realm is very, very important. And we had a major road where you could inline skate, you could actually, have cars and service on this big track. And to your right is the noodle track. In other words, if you didn't want to have to get from point A to B quickly, you actually could noodle through the park. The lower left hand was kind of these ideas of public outdoor rooms, but of very different nature. Again, to the left was kind of small garden-esque, well-maintained areas. The middle one was a great big public amphitheater, great big meeting room where you could have rock concerts. And to the right were different kinds of sports and park areas where kids could come and play. And all the way to the right was an idea about how to light it for the nighttime. And this one image shows the idea that that Willem really kind of pushed, which was having a very integrated interface between the park and the harbor, where trees, spaces actually interlocked with the harbor itself. And we had a series of, more cultivated gardens, fountains, play areas for the people in the office buildings and the newly built apartments. And they also would be charged for maintaining those areas. The center area is a great big amphitheater where you could actually have a soccer pitch. People can, sit and watch over. Could be big rock concerts, sports events, and then we had a bridge over to the down area, so that connectivity between the neighborhoods was actually continued. And that we had a very fun idea where the old station building is, where we actually, as the new speed train goes up, we were creating a whole wooden platform that underneath it would create another kind of art space. And then finally, in this area I liked a lot was an idea of how you could actually create spaces where, girls coming from an Islam background where they needed some sense of privacy and separation could go and play in areas next to boys who want to play basketball. And I can say that this idea really came from an evolution of the idea of the democratic space, because in the United States we've had democratic parks for quite some time, which are great big open expanses of open space. And for many, many years we've realized that those spaces don't work very well, because even though it's so-called democratic, it ends up being ruled by the guys with the big bats. So you actually have to create spaces that psychologically seem defensible so that you can then get more people doing more things. You have to think about the idea of the democratic landscape in actually big public parks often do not work very well. And then finally, the entrance into this was, where this great water tower was, and there were going to be events, restaurant, but a great big kind of celebration getting up into the tail end of the park. Anyway, I was very sad when we lost that, and I am very, very interested to find out actually what happened to it. However, moving right along, a number of years after that, maybe 3 years after that, we were asked we did a competition actually for Exchange Square, which was in Manchester. It is in Manchester, and the square got bombed by the IRA in 1995, and so they took it as an opportunity to actually rebuild this part of the city. And if you can take a look, this image to your left is what our landscape looks like. That's a landscape. And it's all the in-between stuff, in between bad buildings, kind of good buildings, but this is really typical of what our landscapes look like. And our task was to try to figure out how to actually make a place out of this kind of hodgepodge of really pretty ugly stuff. And these were our competition entries, and the idea was to actually try to knit the old part of the city that is actually based on an outcropping of pudding stone up to the upper level of the shopping district, which is kind of getting very sleek and steel and granite. And along the seam where these things are healing, that's actually where a lot of the action is. And in order to deal with the grade change, one area, the shopping area was one story up from the lower area, which is the cathedral district. We created a series of ramps that very slowly brought you down from one height to another. And the ramps were differentiated by these long linear benches. And the object for actually making public spaces work is to create enough of an image where people actually know something's going on, but to leave it mysterious enough that people can bring their own interpretation of what's going on. But this was kind of we do a lot of research every time we go to a site to really find out what is very special about the site. This is an ode to the train industry, without which Manchester would never have become a nexus in the Industrial Revolution. So we made these benches out of leftover train parts. And then the idea of these long, gracious benches was that people could do whatever they wanted on them. They could lie down on them, they could face one way, could face another. In other words, you want to kind of suggest things that can happen, but you want to entice people into using these things by not actually being too dictatorial about how people actually use space. And when the city, when they gave us a brief, they didn't say, okay, Martha, go make a living room for everybody where the Queen can come and thousands of people can sit down and watch TV in the middle of the day, which they do. They actually put up a television screen so people can watch the soap operas during lunch. Now the stream that we put in was because that kind of arc that the whole city is based upon was once a stream bed. And the road was called the Hanging Ditch Road. So we resurrected the ditch, at least symbolically, and created a feature, again, to kind of embed it into that place. And the Hanging Ditch is a great success. You find more people walking and playing on this thing than actually walking by its side. And when you actually entice people to play is very important. We all love to play. Adults like to play even more than kids. And it's become a very, very well-loved, very, very well-loved space. As a matter of fact, it became one of the generators, the engines, for the regeneration of downtown Manchester. And this project became a poster child for regeneration, which is that if you really transform your public open spaces, other things will follow. And in fact, that is exactly what happened. This is also true for cities that aren't exactly regenerating, but are just generating for the first time. And this is true for Mesa, Arizona, which is southeast of Phoenix, out in the middle of nowhere. And it's a very, very fast-growing city, but it's hard to actually characterize the city. That's downtown Mesa. And you have streets that are 100 feet wide, so that a team of oxen can make a U-turn in the street. And the buildings are all 1 story high. So there's like no one there yet, except that the population is growing. And these guys are very ambitious. We had a group of people from the city council who decided they wanted to put Mesa on the map, and they were running a foot race with Phoenix for population. So they decided to develop this area as a cultural arts area. But here's, the landscape in this area is fantastic. The only problem is when you're building in the desert is so fragile that once you disrupt the desert, it doesn't grow back very much. So it means that if you build an ugly building, it's there for a very, very, very long time. And that's exactly what's been going on. So the built environment is horrible. The natural environment is beautiful. Now, I just stuck this in because we work with an architect named Bora, and the senior designer there is Bud Orendorff. And we often work hand in hand with architects from the very beginning, where we're actually coming up with lots of different ideas at first and trying to figure out what really works. And I'm not going to go through these, but these are 3 or 4 very, very different site plans for 3 major theaters, an art gallery, and a school. And the one that we actually came up with is this one, which was basically a crack. The public open space for this facility exists in the middle of it, as opposed to along the street, because we needed to create a street edge, which was very, very important to have there. And the inside of this, the great swath of open space, actually creates the front doors for 3 theaters. There's like a Papa Bear, Mama Bear, and a Wee Baby Bear theater, 3 different sizes. And on top of it, there is an art gallery and a school. And so this is, it's just recently been built. I'm going to go through it very quickly. But the major idea was to, first of all, use the sharp shadows that are created by the sunlight there, which is really intense, and use the plants in a very, very theatrical way. This is all about theater. So it was like putting these plants, these trees, on display, and then letting the sun and the shadows that they cast be the major players. Now, you're looking at the art gallery, which is actually below ground, and this is a kind of an outdoor sunken courtyard where there are shows, gallery shows, and this is a waterfall. And we've been able to kind of use this water wall, very little water, but it really cools that space. It's kind of like an outdoor air conditioner. And then, you know, this is kind of an integration of spaces and landscape together. And here's the art gallery that is actually underground. And then this wall, which actually separates the inner space, the great big arc, what we call the shadow walk, from the street corner. And here we are on the inside. And the idea was to use grass very, very sparingly. In other words, we were very anxious not to actually use a lot of water. But wherever we wanted to create places for people to sit, we used grass so that they were either kind of carpets to sit on or like a great big fat cookie sofa. So we actually made a great big lounge for people to sit on. There we go. So people can kind of hang out on the grass and the seats and in the shade. Now the other idea here is that we created a series of very tiny little rooms so that people could actually break out of the bigger space and actually gather in smaller areas. But it's all about enabling people to sit down and look at people perform and enabling people to perform. For example, this scene shows steps going up to the dance studios, but also it becomes an amphitheater where people can very, in an impromptu way, get out there and start acting, dancing, and watching. So it's a real people place, and a place to go watch people. Then there are these kind of linear tables that I ripped off from the Villolante, which you can splash. It has about 1/4 inch of water, and you can just put your hands in and paddle in there. So any opportunity to kind of create play and interaction. The interior of the table actually is filled with marbles. And at nighttime, the light shines up from the ground and illuminates the glass marbles. But it's been tremendously successful and has actually started to generate a new economy for the little town of Mesa. People are starting to come there, live there, invest in it. So these open spaces and public spaces have been proven to be real economic generators, if they're done well. So these little rooms are breakout rooms where you can break out from the theater and have wine, hang out, have little parties in them. So the more opportunities you have to kind of create intimate spaces inside a bigger space, the more people actually use the space. Now we have a big fountain that's about 600 feet, that's like 200 meters long, based on the arroyo, which is the water system in the southwest, where it rains and rains and rains in the mountains, and then there are these flash floods that come down through the valleys, carve out these ditches, and then the water goes away. So this fountain actually starts, if you take a look at the arc, way at the top, and the water fills up a great big concrete basin, and when the water fills up the basin, it then gushes out into this channel, and the channel fills up, and it rushes down this channel, and then it drains out, and it's dry again. And it does this a few times a day. Then we created different kinds of canopies, and canopies that would be playful with the sun and shadow. And of course, when it does rain there, all the stonework, which is from natural stone around the area, becomes really vibrant. Now we're looking at this outside arc, which is basically a glorified bus station and the sign for this whole development. And this is actually the roof of the art gallery. And everything had to be in planters so as not to affect the gallery below. So we just use these planters basically as plinths, as though the planting themselves were the art gallery. So we kind of reverse the idea of the art gallery and put all the plants on display. And these glass boxes are actually light wells into the gallery below. And people can wait for the bus and hang out there too. But this is a 0-0 corner of the city. is a new project that we did in Dublin for the Dublin Docklands. And it's about 2 hectares. It's right in the middle of a newly developing area in the Docklands. The space actually got built before this performing arts building that's being designed by Daniel Leapskin. But when we saw what Daniel was doing, we thought, well, we better go with it as opposed to against it. So we just basically, our idea was to take this very kind of very strong and aggressive aesthetic of the building and just lay it down on the ground so the whole thing became one united expression. And then we decided to roll out the red carpet to the world and lead people to the front door of Dublin, which is going to be this marvelous music hall. And it's on top of a parking garage. Most of our work in the cities are on top of structures, garages, subways. I mean, all of our work is really heavily technical because it's all attendant to buildings. And these poles actually light up at night, which you'll see. And basically, it's a very simple idea. You know, we have a great big red line, a great big green line, and we really kind of create a whole new look for Dublin, which it has done. So the Performing Arts building is being built now. The green swath is actually where you can go and sit, and there are lots of benches and seats inside the planters, which hold plants that really are indigenous to the waterfront, which there isn't anymore, really. There's no real habitat for those kinds of plants, so we made them able to grow there. And then water fountains, which again kind of took this idea of this cracking earth idea. And the last part of this actually is going to be built and constructed when the theater is finalized, which we're working on right now. The light pulses up and down the pole, so there's always kind of movement at nighttime. This next project is in Qatar. We're working with Skidmore, Owings & Merrill on the headquarters for Qatar Petroleum, and this is a super complicated project, so I'm not going to go into it. Of course, water is a real issue, and a lot of what we designed was really based on trying to use as little water as possible. But the buildings that you see are these leaf-like structures, all made out of concrete. Very, very sculptural, very beautiful. And the landscape actually was created as a carpet that extended from the expression of the building. And that kind of shows you what the buildings are like. But the landscape itself is basically sculpting the desert and using the creation of dunes as part of the aesthetic there. This is what the buildings are going to look like. And so the landscape kind of travels at the bottom of these things. And as the landscape gets inside this corporate headquarters, it gets greener and more lush. And as it heads out to the site, it becomes drier and drier to the point where once we really get out of the site, it's made out of different kinds of stones and asphalt, and it's very, very, we're not planting up there. So we're still working on drawings on this, but it's going forward. It's a very big, complicated project. And then these are in between parking garages because there's a whole level of parking underneath everything. And one idea was to just create a landscape made out of shadows. They didn't go for that, so we're not doing that. But really kind of working with how the wind works and how the silt and the sand actually gets deposited. And working with structures inside the desert itself that would catch wind. And this idea is that we're creating these walls that would collect the sand, but also light them as well. This one is a project that we did a number of years ago in Munich for the Swiss Re headquarters building, and it was with Bota Tirani Richter architects, and Hadi Tirani was the architect on it, and it's an absolutely crazy building. It's a wild building. And we were asked to do the landscape on it because it turns out that when they really figured out what they were building, nothing would grow because it was all dark in the areas that they wanted to have it planted. And it's still difficult for architects to understand that in order to have actual things grow, you need to put water on them, and water weighs a lot, and you need sun and water, soil, that's what you need. And of course, this one really didn't have any room or weight ability. So they brought me in because they know that, I'll entertain trying to do a landscape without the benefit of being able to use plants. Now, to your right, this shows a plan view looking down at the building where it's basically organized in 4 cores, where there are shoeboxes that are the actual offices. And the shoeboxes then sit on a square building below it that houses the various kind of public activities within the corporation. But all the landscape is on top of surfaces. So our big idea was to actually create quadrants and color each quadrant with a different color so you could actually orient yourself through the building. It looks very logical, but when you're inside that building, it's impossible to figure out where you are. So we actually took the idea of the agricultural fields that surrounded the site and applied them to basically a series of roof gardens. Now, one of the more wild ideas was that because Swiss Re didn't know who their neighbors might be, this is an Unterführung, they decided to build a hedge so they wouldn't have to see their neighbors. And the hedge is blind, it's 3 stories high, you can walk inside of it, but basically that hedge will create a wall inside which is the headquarters building. So it's a very spatially rich, really interesting building. I would suggest if you go to Munich, go out there and see it. But where we could not plant plants, we didn't. We used other materials. And this kind of shows like the yellow quadrant, and then some of the variety of green roofs we actually did. And then there were some areas that were very, very dark. And instead of using water, which is ecologically difficult and expensive, we decided to use these mirrored balls. Here's the red quadrant. So it's a patchwork of all these different materials, plus where we could plant, where there was sun, we did plant. And the interior was when all these materials came together and existed under a very thin film of water. So when you walked in, it was completely reflective, but looking down from the office buildings, you could see everything. We're working also in Syria, in Damascus, and we're working for the First Lady on an incredible project. We're working with Henning Larsen Architects in Copenhagen to do a children's center. And we've done a lot of trips trying to really find out the history, which we study the history of the place, the plants, in the culture, as much information as we can get. The site is about 100 feet or 300 meters by 100 meters. And it's a very long, thin site. It's very close to the middle of town, and it's really the first public space that is really meant for children. The First Lady's agenda is very child-oriented to really kind of teach children about how to engage their environment and learn about the world. So she's really backing this thing. And this kind of shows a diagram of a very noisy street, a hillside in the back upon which the university exists. To your right is going to be the Children's Center. So there are basically 3 major areas. One will be the Children's Center to your right. The middle space will be kind of a great big activity, open play area. And to the left is more of a kind of an adult-oriented area that is next to the Opera House. And Henning Larsen has designed this kind of the center that actually looks like the Damascus rose, which is a very powerful symbol in their culture. And of course, when we're trying to figure out what our language is, we actually looked at contemporary art that was being produced based on calligraphy, Arabic calligraphy. And without really getting into the specifics of what it's saying, we really studied the various motions and the forms that the calligraphy was taking. And we actually derived a lot of the forms, which that culture doesn't like straight lines. It doesn't go down with them, they don't relate to it. So we wanted to do something that was very, very kind of flowing. So what you're seeing is that there's a huge parking lot in the middle, and on top of the parking lot are going to be two big grassy amphitheaters, where that's where we're using grass, is inside of bowls. So you have kind of like the building, two bowls, and then you have this kind of arroyo, again, this water area, which is a channeled river that turns into kind of a beach. And here's that beach area, and the idea is to make that into play and as a way of actually engaging kids with water and actually growing things in that area too. The middle areas will be these beautiful bowls that will be on top of the garage. And the idea is to create a surrounding that is totally green, which would be thrilling to the people there because they are so in love with green grass and using green grass. These are going to be used as picnic areas primarily, but then also for outdoor entertainment and play. But the idea of actually being inside of a green room, I think is going to be very compelling. And then right next to this one is then the center. This kind of shows a section through the bowl. It's too small, but the idea of the landscape around the center itself is like a teacup in a saucer. And that we're busy working on the first phase, so you can see, how much more developed the landscape gets. But this kind of shows how the various areas around the building have to relate to the building itself. And really thinking about, we have to think very carefully about how people use open space because, there's a whole variety and gradation of different uses out there. And some are okay to be next to one another and some aren't. I don't want to get into the specifics, but the lower area there is really the playground, and that's really where we've spent a lot of attention, is really creating a series of different levels and a series of different spaces for different activities for the kids, and still be protected and seen as part of the building itself. Now there are a series of very gentle walls that will actually create the levels, and we're suggesting doing mosaics on the walls. And they're also climbing walls, so the kids can also climb on the walls. So the walls become something to play. And we have areas for smaller children, protected areas. We have areas for outdoor performance. Sorry, am I going backwards? No, here we go. And this is a play area. Slides, performance area, and then areas that are next to the building for outdoor learning and a cafeteria. So, this just shows kind of, we do a lot of work with models, just kind of sketching out in three-dimensional form, kind of what we're trying to do. And then we have this great kind of processional that leads into the building itself, and we're designing the benches, which will all be done out of stone. And then I just put this in. This kind of shows a kind of exercise we go down trying to figure out what the paving should be, because paving is a wonderful opportunity for all sorts of things, for design, expression, color, rhythm, texture, and then of course planting. And the idea that we hate plants is ridiculous. It just must read well in the press. Okay, now. This one is in London. We've been working with the Suffolk City Council in terms of helping them to deal with open space issues and planning issues for Elephant Castle. But the first actual piece that is being done, that did get done, is St. Mary's Churchyard, which is in that big circle. So we've just completed the design of this, and it was very interesting because the churchyard actually, this space is full of graves that we couldn't move. So we had to tread very, very lightly and deal with the fact that it's kind of a lumpy ground and there's a lot of stuff happening underneath it. But we also needed to open it up to the street and to create a structured play area for the neighborhood. And just kind of clean it up and kind of make it much more open and accessible. And it's been tremendously successful. We won an award for it immediately. So this is like a graveyard that has kind of come to life again, at least on the surface. And And then the front, as it faces Elephant Castle, is much more hard edge, much more, you know, kind of, you can hang out there, you can wait for the bus, you can watch your kids, you can see what's happening in the Elephant Castle area, but it's a very, much more open up and gracious way of actually meeting the street and giving that space once again an address to the rest of Elephant Castle and kind of make it connect back into the city. So evidently it's gotten so overused at this point. I mean, kids have come to it from all over. There was such a pent-up need for a playground in this area. It's a small little project, but it was very rewarding to actually see this built. This is an interesting one. I'm going to go through this really quickly, but I just put this in there to show you the kind of breadth that we often are asked to think about, where Chatham, which is this little city that's southeast of London, is trying to regenerate itself. It's going to be connected to London through a fast train, which will enable people now to live in Chatham and work in London. And yet, it's a very, very bedraggled, kind of down at the heels little place. It was historically the area where the British Navy docked and has a great big military and naval yard. But the development has been very sporadic, not very well organized. And unfortunately, it has an inside-out town, so that the main road, the main street, forces the backs of all the buildings to actually address the water, which is actually the great place to be. A lot of these cities were built in a way that made the water the bad, ugly place. It was like a sewage system that you never wanted to face the water. And now these cities are trying to figure out how to turn themselves around. And in addition to that, they have an incredible ecological system that runs along the Thames estuary. And so we worked with British Waterways and hydrological engineers to really try to figure out how to not only regenerate the city, but regenerate this kind of ecological open space system to connect the open spaces to actually raise it to a status of a park. And at the same time, actually, we suggested some really wild things like, I mean, these are all showing our thinking process in terms of opportunities and constraints. Where is the development? How is it linked? Is it linked at all? And then here, you know, we started looking at the ecological areas, which are the green areas. But what we proposed here was actually to dam the little hook in the river there, so that the water could actually stay at a level, because Thames is tidal. The Thames is tidal, and when the tide goes out, you have all this muck and needles and garbage, and it really is, it's a really tough edge to commandeer, to actually take hold of and develop. And also, they're really looking at the fact that in global warming, there's going to be much more pressure in terms of the water coming in. So they're starting to think about how to protect themselves as well. So our proposal was to actually dam up that bow of the river so that the city of Chatham could actually start to develop and redevelop the island and develop along the edge of it. So, I mean, the yellow, the purple is a dam, the yellow are roads that would actually access the ecological area and the edge around the river, and then proposing a redevelopment of that island, which is now just industrial, but it could be very, very valuable land for the city, and reconnect the roads, create bridges over to the island, connect out to this fabulous kind of wetlands eco area, join them together, and then encourage development. So, you know, these are big moves that really could actually help to generate a strategy for protecting themselves for flooding, and also begin to kind of generate a new edge for both the island and Chatham for regeneration. We haven't heard from them yet. but we really tested its viability. This next one is this kind of wacky one out in Abu Dhabi, and it's for, it's on also island. It's the developer's Mubadala, and it's the new financial center for Abu Dhabi. And the architect is Jim Getch from DeStefano Getch in Chicago, and the aesthetic of this, as you can see, is kind of almost neo-transformer. And what we wanted to do, we've been working on a master plan for this island. This is actually the signature and first project that's going to be built there. You can see there's also, everything's pointing to this new island that is actually being created. The island itself is about 120 hectares, and the site is about 3 hectares. But it's all built on structure. It's a multi-use project, mixed use. And there's the island. And the uses. There it is situated. But the financial center sits on top of a huge shopping area, so that there has to be connectivity from the plaza level, which is about 20 feet up from the ocean. So very, very complicated level issues. But I just put these in here just so you can kind of take a look at some of our design processes. This was the first idea where we wanted to create a series of trellises and canopies that you could actually walk under and link to the buildings, and to try to create a canopy that would really protect you from the buildings, the size of the buildings actually looming over you and never feeling like you had any privacy. Plus the canopies would be wonderful in terms of providing shade, and also a way of actually dipping down into the base of the building itself. But these are some images, early images of this landscape. Again, it's on top of a roof, under which is a whole shopping area. And the idea is that some of these canopies actually dive down into the shopping areas, which are 3 stories behind, or below it, sorry. We were really kind of going like crazy, and then the architect freaked out. So, so we're not doing those anymore. So, okay, so then we went back to the drawing board, and we came up with this kind of almost wild Victorian pattern, which is kind of like this, I don't know, it's like a floral design that your grandmother may have used on her sofa or something, but something that was very bilaterally symmetric, and also very, much more feminine. And then these leaves are actually made out of great big mounds that would have different colored facets. And then the paving around it would be made of bands of stone. It would look very much like this. So, I mean, the idea is that when you look down on it, it really holds together as this kind of great big pattern. But when you're down in it, it would be very, very sculptural, and you would have these kind of great big kind of earth mounds with colorful ground covers all around you. And some of these things turn into water, some of them turn into water and light. And then we're working with RFR in terms of doing canopies. We're not doing these either because I couldn't stand these, but we're still trying to meet halfway. It's always a challenge. This one is a very, very large park that we were doing for Maras in Dubai, and that stopped. But it's a centerpiece for a huge development where the park actually has to function as a place where people can park, as the first big open space in the city of Dubai. And this thing is really very, very large. Let's see, how big is it? It's about 40 hectares of open space. And all of this is actually functioning very ecologically with the buildings that are going to be planned around it, so that the waste from the buildings will be managed so that we can actually water the trees, water the grass, and create ponds as well. And I won't go into a lot of this, but this is really a heroic effort, and the first time that I think that culture is really taking public open space seriously, because they realized that there's got to be some reason to go to Dubai and to meet people in the lobbies of hotels or going shopping in shopping malls. So the entry area would all be a wetlands garden that would be treating gray water. And then we have these great big kind of green arcs, actually are neighborhood parks, which really cater to the neighborhood on either side. And then there's a swath of open space that goes all the way through. In the meantime, there are roads that are connecting underneath it, parking garages and shops underneath it as well. We have areas that are canopied and are going to be generating electricity using kind of solar panels. We have these very thick walls, which actually act as places to house equipment, to create walkways, secondary walkways, and actual gateways that lead from the neighborhoods into the park proper. We have water play throughout it, and then at the very end, we have a great big kind of public kind of gathering area. This one is a project, I'll go through this quickly, in Seoul. We're doing a huge mixed-use development project with Richard Rogers, Rogers Sturgeon Harbor now. It's a mixed-use development. This kind of shows the architecture. There are two 100-story towers going up of office and residential. And right in the middle of it is a big shopping center. You can see the section through it. It's a big shopping center. And let me go back to the section. The idea of the inside of the shopping center is we're making a forest on the top of the building that is inside this giant shopping center. And what we decided to do is, again, take a look at contemporary art there, and kind of, there was a lot of referring to this kind of stylized landscape of mountains that actually went back to the old style art, Korean art. And we decided we were going to go with the idea of this kind of very stylized mountain idea. So these are just diagrams of where we began, of this idea of this mountain growing in the middle of this shopping center. Oops, it's doing a strange thing. And you know, we start off with doing tons of different ideas. I don't know why this is doing this, but okay, there's the plan for the forest in the middle. And the idea is that we're making a deck, a rolling landscape out of a wooden deck through which all the bamboo comes through. And so when you come in, you actually look up, and at the very top is this bamboo forest. But we have these overhanging plinths that actually will kind of lead you up. There'll be these green beards that kind of lead you up to the top. We'll go through this quickly. And this is kind of an image of this wooden deck that is actually a rolling landscape. We'll have a stream go through it. And that basically the bamboo is coming up through the wooden deck. And there's a lot of heavy-duty shopping going on, so they're very, very conscious of trying to create a differential. It turns out that the big spenders, the men come, they let their women go shopping, but then they want to get out of it and go someplace else. So this actually is probably going to be more for men than women. And this kind of shows there's one last level, which we call the pebble. And this is how the wood would actually wrap around that surface. And this shows you the idea of the landscape of this wooden floor that's actually going to happen. And this being the railing that keeps it from falling off. Then in the back, and I don't have good drawings to show this, but there's a stream that is made out of shards of stone. And the shards come tumbling down the back end like a stone waterfall. And then they go into the Sunken Garden, which I'll show you. The Sunken Garden is at the base of two 100-story towers. And it basically is 3 stories below street level. So it's really down in the ground. And the idea, there we go. This is the plan, and those 2 squares are the cores of those towers. And the dark blue is all going to be water. So if you go down into this basement, you look out and there is this kind of cracked landscape of stone and water. And in the middle, you see on the top there, is a place where all the guys go to smoke and to hang out around the edge of a space and watch other people. Because evidently, when you go there, that's what the guys do. They come out of the office, they go light up their cigarette, and they hang out along the edges. So we made a great big area where all the edge hanger-outers could hang out. So this is this rock pile that we're actually constructing. It's like well, it kind of looks like Superman's cave. But the idea is that the guys can go in there, they can sit on these steps, and they can puff away and kind of watch everybody else. And that these sheets of stone are coming down and then creating a ground plate that will then have water running over it, very, very thin. You can see that's a section. The street level is up here. Then you have the sunken kind of rock quarry plaza, and then you go back into the building. And then the sides of this quarry are also made out of these pieces of stone, which will have water and light. But it looks like the earth is just kind of cracking apart. And this is the final project, which was an art installation that I did this past summer in Reykjavik. I entitled it "I Hate Nature" because it's very interesting. The natural landscape of Iceland is so overpowering and so sublime, people just get sick of it. And what's interesting, I mean, it's like too much. It's so beautiful and so powerful. It's too much. So I decided I wanted to do something about the sublimity of the landscape in Iceland. So I kind of took this geode as a model. And the installation was at the Museum of Art in Reykjavik. And these were the materials, which is just kind of wood with a very sticky, gooey black paint and aluminum. And aluminum was a big topic there because what's happening there for their economy is that they're allowing aluminum to be smelted in Iceland because they have thermal heat and they can smelt the aluminum very, very cheaply. But these buildings are huge, and it's actually really degrading their landscape and causing social problems. So the topic of aluminum is very, very timely. Now, this is Jake Walker and Dan Gass who helped build this, and you can see at the beginning of us installing this, they had enough energy to fool around, but that was just at the beginning. We worked for 5 days trying to build this thing. It was insane. The only good thing I can say about it is that the sun didn't go down, which was helpful. We needed all the time we had. This is a model of the installation, and basically what you'll see is that right now you're looking to the inside of the geode, and we're trying to figure out how to actually cover the whole interior with crinkled industrial-grade aluminum. And the idea is that people would walk inside the geode and only have very controlled views into this space that was so blindingly bright and so intense that, it was painful. And I guess the other good thing is that it wasn't sunny. And here we are just finishing up inside the space. I realized that I didn't like the way that the seams were coming together, and one day we ran out and we went to all the stores at Reykjavik and bought out their entire supply of kitchen-grade aluminum foil. And then we got stopped by the police. This is BAM, group of young architects who helped me do this. And then the landscape architects came out and helped as well, thank God they did. So, this is the installation. So it actually sits, it's a big box that sits in a U-shaped courtyard that kind of sits, uncomfortably in it. It's squeezed in. And then looking from above, you can see this open space. So it kind of sits there like a meteor, just kind of black and brooding and tough. Now, when you get inside of it, there are very, very few places where you can actually see the sky. And We designed it so that you really couldn't see how big it was or where you were looking at. It seemed to go on forever. And that because it was so dark inside, when you got in there and your eyes were dilated and you look into the inside, it was pretty painful to see. It was very, very bright. It's really intense. But very, very controlled views out into this, like a cauldron of light. And then the party. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much.